الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر.
Welcome to Let the Quran Speak. My name is Sophia, I'm your host. The aim of Let the Quran Speak is to help you gain deeper insights into Muslims and Islam as it is practiced here and in other parts of the world. In this episode, we'll be exploring two different stories. First, managing finances. It's not all that difficult to fall into debt. In fact, most people living in the West have debt. We shop with credit cards, and we learn to buy now and pay later. Being able to own something without having the means to pay for it immediately seems a convenience of modern times. Is borrowing money bad? And to what extent should debt be avoided? When does it become a problem? How do we control debt, avoid usury, and overcome financial hardship? Next, dealing with hardships, the Prophet's ways. When we face difficulty, we often think, why me? Doesn't God love me anymore? Don't I pray and fast and do all the things that God requires? The Islamic tradition is replete with stories of the prophets, all of whom were good human beings, beloved to God, and yet forced to endure and overcome much suffering and hardship. These prophets include Joseph, Abraham, Noah, and of course, Muhammad. Why were they given hardship if they were such good human beings? What sorts of tools did they use to overcome the difficulties they faced? And what lessons can we draw from their stories? And we'll round out the show by answering questions we received from you, our viewers. So please send us your questions at www.quranspeaks.com. Okay, Brother Shabir, so let's deal with managing finances first. We live in a society in which it's very easy and normal and usual to be in debt, to use credit cards, to have financing and all that sort of thing that comes with living in a society like this. So, what are your thoughts? Is this sort of playing to our weakness? This notion of debt, of being in debt, that debt is normal?
Well, debt has existed for a long time in human history, and debt has been used as a way in which the powerful controlled the weaker elements in society. In our present time, some of that remains, but debt has also been turned largely into a convenience, allowing people to buy now and pay later, where one has the security, one feels that there will be no problem, I will not be controlled by anyone, I have a reasonable and stable job, a regular income, and I can easily pay off whatever it is that I'm obligating myself to at the moment. So one has to differentiate between the various types of loans and the loans for what purposes, and just be smart about what sorts of loans one takes. Yeah.
So in the past, we would have this idea of saving up, working hard, saving up, and then buying that coveted item that we wanted. Now we can just buy it and pay later. So there are dangers associated with that. That's why I asked, does it play to our weaknesses?
Yes, definitely. Commercial interests naturally want to sell their products or their services, and they are advertising and competing with each other. So each one wants to get their share of the market, and they're encouraging people to buy now and pay later. To the extent now that people feel compelled, we just have to do that because everyone else is getting this new TV or everyone else is getting this new car, and I've got to get the same, even if I don't have the means right now, but I'll try somehow to be able to pay it off in the future. So it's more than just a convenience. It becomes now a necessity, and in many cases it becomes quite burdensome.
So for some people, this is really difficult for them because the debt compounds, and sometimes it leads to bankruptcy, to depression, to family problems. So to what extent is debt good or allowed in Islam?
Well, to begin with, the Quran is very clear that charging interest on loans is prohibited. And it is known that in Arabia at the time when the Quran was being revealed, people did charge interest and compounded the interest. As the Quran says, adafam wa da'afa, doubled and multiplied.
So interest is, I guess, where things get scary for individuals, right? Because, just having debt is, you can pay it back. But then when you have interest added onto that, the debt that you have to pay back accumulates, right?
Yes, and this is
The
why.
amount that you have to pay back.
This is why, from the Quranic point of view, this is immoral to charge interest on debt, because if you have money to lend, then basically you're well-to-do, you have excess, and then there is a poor element in society, let's say a brother. That's what we'll call a fellow human being, a brother or a sister, now comes to you for asking for a loan, often because they're in a position of weakness, they are in dire need, and now they have to ask for this loan. If they had the money, they wouldn't come to ask, because it is somewhat below one's dignity to have to ask someone else. Everybody likes to be self-sufficient. So here we have the poor person asking the rich, can you lend me something? And the rich saying, well, yeah, I'll lend you, but you have to pay me back with interest. So where does the interest come from? It's nothing but the hard work of the poor person. So the Quran speaks against this and says that you can take your capital that you have loaned, but you're not allowed to take any interest. And this is why it is noted that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, announced during the last pilgrimage that all interest amounts outstanding are now hereby cancelled. So the Quran gave the prescription, and people were left to repair their transactions on their own. But then there came a time when it was declared totally unacceptable for anyone to now charge interest.
So we know that was at the Prophet's time, but now we live in a society where interest is rampant, right? Interest is part of our society and our money transactions. So to what extent should we borrow, and how should we manage our borrowing?
Yeah, well, some people find themselves in a situation of necessity. They have to borrow. Some people have to borrow in order to be able to own a house. Otherwise, it might become quite impossible. And some people may say, well, I can rent, and I wouldn't be part of that interest system. I wouldn't pay into a system that is, in a way, somewhat immoral. But of course, there are no good alternatives. And if one just simply rents, then you are paying rent to somebody who uses that rental income to pay for the property which you're living in, and eventually it is the landlord that owns the property, and you as a renter continue to rent. So this is not a good outcome either. And a believer has to be sagacious and smart and understand his surroundings and adjust accordingly while keeping in view the basic elements of the Islamic teaching. So what is very basic here is what is described in the Quran. The Quran again and again speaks about interest, but condemns the one who is receiving the interest. The Quran never condemns the one who is giving the interest. Some hadiths speak about the one who gives the interest, but that's from the point of view that you had better not support a system, just have nothing to do with the system. But of course, there is a great deal of difference between the one who is taking the interest and the one who is giving it. The one who is giving it may be under some kind of compulsion or feeling burdened by necessity. The one who is taking it has no reason to take it, and the Quran condemns the act of taking it, because that is what is actually immoral. That is the taking of the money that comes from the hard work and the sweat of the poor person.
So we get a lot of questions on the show about borrowing and debt. So I guess the issue is necessity, right? So someone can be in debt if it's for a necessity of life, right?
Yes, some people need to take student loans, otherwise it might become prohibitive for many young Muslims to get a university education in this country. And this too should be seen as a great need. Muslims cannot be left behind in any sphere, especially in terms of gaining an education. But then there are luxury items. You know, somebody wants to buy the largest TV available on credit and to pay for it over the next 2 years. And it is easy to think that, well, let me buy it now, I'll pay later and I'll have the money. But very soon this gets out of hand and you find yourself unable to pay. You rack up large bills on your credit card, you think that you'll get the bill, you'll pay it as usual, but suddenly the bill hits you, and that's when you realize how much you have actually spent, and you realize that you won't have the money, and then you go into credit, you prolong the payment, you might only be required to pay $10 as a minimum to maintain a good credit standing with the credit card agency. But you may find that if you pay $10 a month, it will take you like 30 years to pay off a small debt. So one has to, again, be very smart and manage one's finances well.
I guess you should also remember that you're making a promise to pay, right? So you can't necessarily break that promise easily. Or
True.
you shouldn't, as a Muslim, break that promise
True.
easily.
And it is for this reason that it is noted that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, used to make dua. He used to pray to God. I mean, we pray to God for so many good things, right? So he used to pray to God to protect him from entering into debt and also into falling into disbelief, protect him from falling into disbelief. And somebody asked him, I mean, in the same breath you're asking for protection from debt and also from disbelief, as if the two things are on par. And he said, well, debt causes a person to lie. And that is a serious offense in the Islamic faith. And you can see how, it happens. You promise to pay, then you don't have the money, and then, you make some kind of excuse because you're in that situation. So don't put yourself in that situation. Don't take debts don't take loans don't get into debt without some reasonable cause. And we've mentioned some items which are necessities, but beyond that, for luxury purposes, it's not a good idea for Muslims to obligate themselves and then find themselves to be in dire circumstances later. It's better to be contented with what you have, enjoy the blessings which God has given you, give thanks to Him, and move on. And as you said, save for what you want to own in the future.